Greetings and welcome back to ZachCast, your official podcast for local government nerdery. After an extended summer hiatus, we are back and better than ever. Patrick, how was your vacation?
Man, I'm so glad the kids are back in school. The last week of productivity has been amazing.
Yeah, we're at the stage now where it's not really a summer vacation. You know, even the vacations that we take are not really vacations because the kids are just running around all over the place and having fun and crazy. And it's a lot of fun, but it's not restful. So
right. Can we have a conversation about the last quote unquote vacation you just took?
Sure. Last weekend?
Okay. Yeah, last weekend. Y'all went and you saw Wicked, right? So you flew to New York, saw Wicked. Okay. And then the one thing I want to talk about, and I noticed the pictures, right? But were you in a costume for the Lady Gaga concert?
I was not. I was wearing a shirt very much like this, and my black joggers. And
Okay.
I found a really nice light Chelsea football club jacket while I was there, which was good because I didn't realize it was going to be quite as cold as it was.
Right.
Not that it was necessarily like objectively cold, but coming from, upper 90s into the hundreds here in Texas and then going up there where you got lots of shade and you got wind tunnels through the buildings and stuff. So even in like the mid 70s, it felt chilly at night. So yeah, I found a nice little jacket there. That was my costume. I was not dolled up like many of the attendees. But so yeah,
I just noticed like you were in a picture, but it was like only like a side view. And you couldn't really tell if you were in a costume or not. So I really thought I wanted to hold this question for the podcast to like get you on the record.
No costume.
Of whether you went. Okay.
So this was supposed to be just a father-daughter trip because with my daughter's dance schedule and the sort of limitations on my wife, being the only one who can go there and help her get dressed and do all the stuff, she spends a lot more time with my daughter than I do. And so I get the boys, and that's fun. But we wanted to have a little one-on-one trip. So we were going to go just me and her to New York, go see some museums, go do some shopping, go see Wicked, just have a little trip. And then Lady Gaga announced her tour and that she was going to be in New York the same weekend. And so my wife jumped on board our trip and kind of stowed away.
Did she sing the Bradley Cooper song?
She did.
Okay. Was that pretty awesome live? I mean, that's what I would want to see personally.
Yeah, I was hoping that she'd also sing the Top Gun song.
Okay.
But it was funny because, she has this new album out, and so the whole concert is like this theme. It's like a story that she's telling, and so she goes through like the first 3 acts, and then it's almost like she gets to her almost like sellout phase where it's like, all right, here's this song that I did for this movie. And then here's the song that I did with this artist and then this other artist. Like, these are not like my songs per se. Like they're totally different than the other songs that she'd been singing. So I was hoping that maybe she could fit in the Top Gun song too. But she didn't.
She didn't.
And she kind of just went back into.
Okay, last question on this topic before we move on to like some meat and potatoes, and also known as college football because it starts this weekend. Really important question here. The movie that she did with Bradley Cooper, what was the name of that movie?
A Star is Born.
A Star is Born. Okay. Released before or after COVID?
I'm sure it was before.
Okay. Wow. Man, I was getting my haircut last week and we were having this conversation in the barbershop and we were specifically talking about this song, and I was like, oh, it had to be like 2021. I felt like that was a COVID movie. It's not. It's like 2017, 2018.
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah, it's wild. Nothing makes you feel older than like where those movies are. Johnny Cash, the Johnny Cash movie.
Walk the Line. That was like 2008, 2007?
I think so. Even before that, I think it was like 05 maybe.
Yeah, 2005.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So my fridge went out this week, and I had to have someone come in, take a look at it. I thought it was maybe 4 or 5 years old, which sadly at this point is still a good lifespan for a fridge.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And the guy's like, oh, well, yeah, you've had this since 2017. I'm like, I've had this for 8 years.
Yeah.
I only had one kid when we bought that fridge. Yeah. So
Well,
time,
they've gotten
time
so
starts to
expensive.
fly as you get older.
And they've gotten so expensive now that like the repairing them is somewhat worth it. You know, we were at, I feel like in like early 2000, we were at the stage where, okay, you could pay like $400 to repair a fridge, or you could just go buy a new one for, you know, $650 or $800. And now like fridges are not cheap. They've gotten very, very expensive.
Yes.
They've gotten fancy too. Right. So
Yeah, but
you may have been my first friend ever to like buy a fancy fridge. Didn't you buy the one that has like the camera on the inside that shows
yeah,
you?
but we didn't buy it because of the technology. In fact, I didn't want that fridge, but it was so much cheaper than the other ones.
Right.
It was on sale for some reason, probably for a reason.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was like $1,200 cheaper than every other fridge. So I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And the fridge itself has been fine. It's just that the cooler radiator, whatever it's called, it just overheated and it's dead now. So
Right. Well, I would like to tell everybody before we jump into college football, I would like to tell everybody that because of summer, we haven't been doing podcasting. But the reality is I think we've just been so busy. It's been a very, very rigorous budget season. It's been a very tough legislative session. And so I think we've just really been bogged down in the minutia of some details that are flowing out. So let's talk. I want to take on SB10 first, and then we'll jump into college football as kind of a separator between the two topics that I have today to talk about. So we're in special session right now, and in special session, the governor basically can call what he wants to discuss and talk about. And one of the things that he put in his call on top of the redistricting is SB10, or specifically that he wants to further lower property taxes and revenue generation in the localities and the governmental entities that are, in his call, it's everybody. But what has really transpired is it's basically cities and counties, and it leaves out almost all of your special districts. So your emergency services districts are left out of SB10 right now, and your like mud districts, municipals, freshwater supplies, those type of things are also left out. So originally, the bill passed the Senate. SB10 kind of flew through the Senate. It was going to take the 3.5% M&O cap, so maintenance and operations tax, still no cap on the INS side, M&O cap, and lower it to 2.5%. So that's what passed out of the Senate. The House took the bill, and man, did they make some changes. But basically, the House took the bill and amended the bill multiple times. And to kind of give you the gist of what has happened, they amended out the 75,000 and up or below provision, right? But they only amended it on one side of the bill. And then they also passed an amendment to exclude public safety cost. Now, that is pretty well defined in the amendment. Now that I've seen the language, I think originally I looked at this and said, man, public safety could really be talked about. But the amendment basically looks at this and says whatever your public safety cost is at the end of July of this year versus what your public safety cost is at the end of July next year will be taken into account in your truth and taxation calculation as a credit before you start looking at what the increases in your voter approval rate are, right? Which another amendment also took the voter approval rate from what SB10 originally was, which is 2.5% down to 1%. But it left a bracket in the bill of 75,000 and up, which was not the intent. So right now, the way the bill is written out of the House, if the Senate was just to pass the House version, which we do not believe is going to happen. I've had some conversations with a couple of senators. I just don't see that happening. But right now, the way the bill is written is that if you are a city or county of less than 75,000 in population, you will have a 1% cap. If you are a city or county with a population of more than 75,000, you will have an exemption for your public safety cost before the 1% cap. So obviously extremely detrimental to cities of less than 75,000, which in most cases, we all know cities of less than 25,000 are typically faced with public safety costs that are higher than they actually generate in their M&O taxes, right? And so, I think this is kind of interesting. The other side of this is it is a bazooka-sized loophole in the bill, and frankly, I think some of the staff members on the Senate side are going to do the math. and they're going to look at this and go, in most cases, this would actually allow more of an increase than the current 3.5% cap that we have in place now on the M&O side, right? The what we call the VAR, the voter approval rate. So we are going to see this go to conference committee, and I think we're going to see another floor vote in both the House and the Senate. But there are some discrepancies, and there's kind of some weird things that are going on. One, I'm not sure SB10 in its clean form would have passed the House at 2.5%. And I can't figure out if that's because 2.5% is too low for them or not low enough. Like, there are different factions, and there's not a lot of compromise. But the amendments that were put in place to make people happy because they needed for lack of a better term, they needed a populist message that they were going to cap local government spending at 1% for everything except for public safety, even though anybody in a city management or finance business of cities would realize that if you just think that through logically, it's probably more than 3.5% increases that you're getting today. But it's a better message than say, we're going to cap it at 2.5%. So that's the gist of what we know about SB10 now. We're on a very tight deadline. Almost every legislator that I have talked to has said they want to be home by Labor Day, which, is just a few days away. And they don't want this. There is more time on the special session than Labor Day, but they want to be done by Labor Day, and they want to go home. So we fully expect there to be a compromise that goes through the committee process or the reconciliation process between the two, the House and the Senate, and then we fully expect them to basically probably for the House to adjourn and just go home. It's going to be a fun couple of days in the meat grinder, so we'll see what ends up coming out of this bill. But I think for cities, I would say you need to expect some difference than what you have right now in today's world. You need to expect that the cap is going to move down from 3.5% to 2.5%, or somewhere in that range. And there may be some type of flare that comes out of the House side to get them to agree to it because they're looking for a different message. So we may have like multiple calculation methods that we have to do. Any
Good.
questions, Chad?
So I don't know, like, having laid everything out, like, where do you want to go with this conversation? I don't think that it's probably all that helpful for us just to complain about it and about the fact that the legislature doesn't seem to understand anything or even care about local governments, which we've known for a long time.
Right.
So, like, that's not news. A 1% cap on property tax growth is insane. Like, we all know that.
Right.
So maybe it's best to talk about, like, what should cities be looking for moving forward to mitigate all of this drama. Like,
I think,
do we need to be, are we going to turn into California and we need to start feeing everything? Like, are we going to have to increase our permit fees, increase our park rental fees, start charging for library cards? Is it going to cost like $400 to adopt an animal from your shelter? Like, is that the road that we should start looking at? Because we're going to have to make up this revenue somehow. You can't operate on 1%, overall growth on your existing values.
Yeah,
we just have to start cranking out new developments so that we can first of all increase the compounding. So like 1% on a higher base is more than 1% on a lower base. Plus, you get the full value of new development. So like, should we just start letting everything get developed and set aside some of the the public criticism of new developments or apartments or whatever comes down the line, and just let this stuff happen because we have to make up for this cap in some way?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where everything will start rolling uphill, right? I think cities will start looking at more. They will start looking at the services that they provide, and they will get down to the nuts and bolts of what is required to provide it. And then within those services that they provide, they're going to figure out a cost of service system where everything is thought of as an enterprise. I think that's the initial reaction that I've heard kind of from most folks in the city management field is, the comment of, your property tax isn't really paying for the library, so we're just going to charge everybody who uses the library $60 a year for a library card fee, right? Everything's going to become a subscription. Your property tax pays for the base rate of that police officer, but if you have to call that police officer because your car got broken into, we're going to send you a bill for $125 for the call for service, right? Like those are the types of things that I think are coming down the pipeline. And eventually it's going to get to a point where cities are going to have to consider for themselves whether they even want to be in the specific business of law enforcement, right? Most people forget this, but in the state of Texas, if a city doesn't have law enforcement, it's the responsibility of the county sheriff to enforce that law, right? So you're going to get into that, and then you're going to have crime increases because you're going to have
the
less
worst
touches.
possible
Yes, the worst
option that
possible
we could
solution.
have. Not to mention that the county also has this
Caps.
1% cap.
Yes, correct. The county also has the cap. So, I think you'll eventually have a movement. We have CCPD sales tax to pay for police. I think you'll eventually have like a separate movement for like a public safety district that would pay for police, which would be a separate tax. So, residents are not going to they're not going to allow crime to get out of control. They'll go to the polls and vote. There's a reason why the smaller, like emergency services districts and things like that have been cut out of the bill. And that's because of the political fear that those folks have of directly being able to shown to cut public safety. But there's a point in which the penalty for cutting public safety that's in the statute now, because you can't defund, quote unquote, defund the police department in Texas. There's a law that penalizes cities, but there's going to be like this, this return issue where you're going to have a conversation with yourself that it's actually probably better for you to start to look at those cuts and take that penalty maybe down the road. Because you're eventually going to get to a point where you're cutting in the bone, which means all you have left is your public safety services, right? You basically have administration, right? Your internal flow departments and your public safety services. And then you're going to shed a lot of those other services or turn them into enterprises, right? I think from a city perspective, yes, we need to start thinking about those. I think also from a city perspective, we need to start educating voters. We need to, on a local level, start educating voters with what is actually occurring, right? When watching those Senate Bill 10 hearings, it is laughable to listen to some of these elected politicians saying out loud that all of these evil cities and counties out there are just going to the 3.5% rate every single year. And there's like no background to that, right? Like they're not providing any factual information or statements to that truth. They're just saying it. It's just a statement, right? The reality is
we live in a post-truth era right now.
100%. Just say it and it is true, right?
And it's going to go away in 5 minutes anyway.
Right. And
no one's going to back check you.
And so I asked this question of our finance team, which, we do finances for 30 plus cities in the state of Texas and budgets for them or work on budgets with them. We have very few clients that are going to the full 3.5%, right? Most people are going 1% or 2%, or they're at the no new revenue rate. And I actually addressed this on my personal Facebook page, which is not normally where I talk about these things, but the issue here is that people's taxes are going up. Let's not. So cities are collecting 1 or 2% more, and people's taxes are still going up. And we as cities, as governmental entities, as city council members, need to do a better job of discussing what is happening. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to get these just really stiff revenue caps that are being placed on us because the politicians don't understand how to fix the system. And it's not, they're not going to go learn. Right. They're going to do the easy populist thing, and they're going to keep blaming the evil local governments that are there. By the way, predominantly conservative led from a local politician level, right? Local governments. Notice that they don't talk about, they don't talk about the Abilene, Texases or the Waco, Texases, or, they always point out Dallas or Austin, right? Or Houston as the evil people that are out there, right? The reality of it is that, cities are not really increasing taxes all that much. They're bringing in maybe 1 or 2% more revenue, yet who's paying for that revenue is changing. Right? Because of appraisal methods, that is changing. And we have to do a better job of explaining that to our residents and we have to feed it up to state legislators. We have to feed it up to state senators. We have to explain to them that if a commercial property appraises for 0 or 1% additional value and residential I'll just give you the example that we just did for the city of the Colony. The city of the Colony was increasing in residential value by 10.84% per year, and residential was at that standard 1 to 3%, right? They have, since 2018, residential customers in the city, or residential citizens in the city, are paying for 9.5% more of the city services than they were in 2018 because of the burden shift, because of the changes in appraisal. But the Colony's not really collecting from existing properties. They're not collecting all that much more money, right? It's just residents are picking up the burden while commercial and business properties are getting significant tax decreases. In most cases, tax decreases. And that's because of the appraisal system. And until we go get at that specific issue, we're going to be in trouble. And I do want to take just a minute to talk about this from a standpoint of what the math is. So sorry, I gotta pull this up.
It's always a fun experiment when Patrick is going to go through the math, and then not only when Patrick's going to go through the math, but also on a podcast. So buckle up, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So I want to talk about this real quick so everybody can hear this. And here is the algebra of what happens because of appraisal methods. Okay. Let's say your city or county collects $100 in taxes in 2024, $50 from the residential class properties and $50 from the business commercial class of properties. Then in 2025, they go collect that same $100 in taxes from those existing properties, right? So this is the no new revenue rate, okay? Residential appraisals went up 8% in that year, and commercial properties went up 1% in that year. The net effect is a shift in the tax burden. Residential customers will now pay $51.73 of that $100, and commercial will pay $48.27 of that. So residential properties see a 3.47% tax increase, and commercial business properties see a 3.4% decrease. It works that way because it's exactly $100, right? But that is the no new revenue rate. So the city is collecting 0% new revenue from those existing properties. But because of the appraisal methods, residential property is paying almost the current cap, right? And commercial's getting a decrease. Now, take that, compound it over 10, 15, 20 years, and that burden shifts dramatically over that horizon. That is what we need to tell people. We need to tell residents that when they come to our city council meetings, and we need to know from a city perspective what our burden shift is. We need to go back and look 5, 10 years with these appraisals and what has happened. And we should be able to tell them, yes, we understand we have collected $0 new dollars or whatever that number is. And yes, we understand that you are paying for 9.5% more of the services. There's absolutely nothing we can do about it except inform you so that you can go have a conversation with your state rep or your state senator. There is a very simple solution. And that is when we're going in and fixing the state tax code, if they want to keep the appraisal methods that they have, because I don't think we're going to get rid of that, but if they want to keep it, then they should split the millages. We should look like Florida folks, and we should split the millages, which means if we want to collect the same amount of money from residential that we collected last year, it should have its own tax rate, and business, personal, and industrial, however we want to split those, should also have their own tax rates so that we can do that. That is easy to calculate. But we should collect the same amount of revenue from the same class under a no new revenue rate every single year. And that is really, really, really easy to do. And it's a very easy fix, and it will stop screwing residential taxpayers, because that's what's happening. Cities are not collecting more money. The appraisal system is screwing over your voters. And I think we need to tell that story. We got to do a better job of telling that story so that we can actually get this job fixed. They are not going to stop picking on cities until they figure out what's wrong, and they are guessing wrong right now. So, my 2 cents.
The only thing that I wanted to use a ChatGPT word, delve into a little bit on your commentary here, is this idea that the residential property owners are getting screwed. Okay, like when you lay it out like that, which we've done many times on this podcast and in other places, it is 100% true that the way that the system works right now, the burden shifts to the properties that are growing in value faster.
Right.
You cannot get around that. However, there's an expectation when you buy a house that it's going to appreciate in value.
Correct.
And the faster it appreciates, the better in a vacuum. Right?
In a vacuum. It creates all types of affordable housing issues, but yes, in a vacuum.
Of course, yes. Well, we've already got ours, so we don't care about that. Right?
Sorry, 24-year-olds.
The question is it healthy to have sustained growth in single-family residential homes of 5, 7, 8, 10% a year for multiple years? Is that an indication of a healthy city or an unhealthy city?
100% it's an indication of an unhealthy city that has major planning issues.
Right, but we celebrate it. Oh, home values are up 7%, right? And
the
of
real
course
estate
that means
industry,
the taxes,
which is
the
loud.
taxes are going to go up. Right. But what is that an indication of? Is that you don't have, among other things, you don't have any kind of equilibrium between supply and demand in your housing.
Nor is there. Yeah. So hold on. I know you're talking the housing issue, and I want to stay on that. Mm-hmm. But nor is there a mechanism for cities to fix that issue. Most cities say, well, we have homestead exemptions to try to go fix that issue, but that doesn't really work, right? Because the percentages don't math out.
Right, and that's the same kind of Band-Aid that the tax reform is, right?
Correct.
The underlying problem is this cognitive dissonance that homeowners have, that their home value should go up forever and their property taxes should stay the same or go down forever. And you cannot have both. So we can't change the sort of psyche behind homeownership as like the primary store of wealth. And the main way is like forced savings, right? Even though if your valuations didn't actually go up more than even inflation and you're paying off your mortgage, like you're still gaining equity in your investment, right? You don't just need appreciation in the value to gain equity, although that helps.
We've never studied this, put a pin in this for the revisions we're making in the property tax module right now, but we've never studied what that actual healthy number is. Right? Like if you had like a green and red, kind of thing here, like, is that healthy number inflation or is that healthy number actual growth? Because I mean, look, as the American economy since the 50s, I know you hate this, but I'm going to say it out loud. The American economy is extremely dependent on the growth in a home's value, right? Mm-hmm. There's whole industries that are built that way too. And so I would think that number would probably be what we would consider higher than inflation. But if that number's 9, 10, 11%, then I think there are some structural issues within that community that need to be fixed in order to encourage more building to happen, right? Like, we don't play the supply and demand game within our permitting processes very well.
No, because there's too much politics involved.
Agreed.
To do that. And there's also other things with financing and things like that are challenging and that we have no control over either.
Right. But should there be like a permit pipeline on the number of approved houses that are going to be constructed? And
if my home values go up by 8%, then I need to increase my new permits by some percentage.
Correct.
Start to try to mitigate that growth.
Right. Like that seems like something that could be analyzed. Right. You could see that within the TAV values, the taxable appraised values that come in. you would be able to see that on a year-to-year basis so that you could in the next year say, hey, we want to hit a larger target with our council, with our planning and zoning boards and things like that to get a larger lot developments, put in or whatever that may be. Like we should be able to have these targets for affordable housing that are put in place and are measured based on the growth of appraised values. That this is more of an affordable housing conversation than it is a taxation, conversation, but the two really do play hand in hand, right?
If if residential properties and commercial properties are appreciated at around the same rate, then this burden shift would be far less pronounced. And we'd have a lot fewer legislators trying to fix the problem every single session.
Well, I will say, I think from a market perspective, they do appreciate pretty similar, right? Land values, improvement values, all those type of things, they appreciate. The problem is the appraisal methods are different, right? That's why they don't necessarily appreciate in somewhat of a tandem. You're still going to have market downturns. Like right now you have market downturns that are occurring like in office space, right? You're still going to have like cyclical downturns that occur within each industry. You're seeing it right now in housing. You're seeing a significant flattening in housing, probably some negative territory, maybe not in all markets in Texas, but in some. You're seeing some of that in the housing side, mainly due to interest rates. Because at a 7 to 8% mortgage rate, it's just kind of locked up people buying houses. So, or locked out is the better way to say it. So I think there are some things to consider there that are extremely important. But I thought you brought up a really good point there on if appraisals on residential houses are going up 10+%, and it's probably lower than that. It's probably like unhealthy at 7.5 or 8. I'd love to do some Gavin research on that one and see what we came up with. But if it's going higher than that, then there are some structural issues in the city that need to be fixed from a management perspective to build more. At the same time, we have these new growth caps with SB10 that are almost going to discourage some of that growth as well. I think you're going to have, or at least discourage you from growing a little willy-nilly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, it would. So, and I've said this about Prop 13 in California as well. So in Prop 13, the two ways that you can really, it's so funny because we went to this luncheon in the San Diego area a couple weeks ago. Yep. And there was a lot of discussion about the Prop 13 impacts for all of those communities in Southern California. And, they're growing, they can only grow at 2%. The valuation can only grow 2% for every kind of property, right, unless there's a change of ownership or it's a new development. And right. So, all of these cities are getting their numbers from the assessor, and they know they're going to get 2% for the most part. I think they said there was 20,000 or something properties that were actually less than 2%, and so they got some kind of refund.
Yeah, they get a prop. They get a Prop 8 refund. There's another prop that they get the decline as well.
So, millions and millions of properties in the San Diego County area.
Right.
Like a small fraction of them grew. The market value grew less than 2% from year to year. So the cities already know they're going to get their 2%, and then the only other way to increase that is if a lot of people sell their houses, which isn't happening right now. And houses are really expensive anyway, or if you have new development, right? So even though Prop 13 is terrible policy, in theory, it should create some incentives to build. I think the same is true for even at a 3.5% cap, certainly at a 2.5% cap, and I think definitely at a 1% cap, public safety exemptions notwithstanding. Because at that point, the only way for you to increase your property tax revenue is to build new value, put new value on the ground.
The problem is not from the city perspective. The problem becomes the customer demand. Because what's happened in California's market because of Prop 13 is everything is Prop 13, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so an investor property gets bought and it only goes up by 2%, but new construction has gone up maybe 30% over that same period of time. And what I'm saying is you had like 10% increase and you have like a 30% increase on the cost of new construction. It is cheaper for somebody to rent in an investor-owned property, that investor still make a profit than it is for that person to go buy a new home. So it almost discourages people to go have home ownership, and it encourages large corporate trust business within the home realm, right? And so it causes that structural market manipulation that Prop 13 and what it's done is it's caused people not to want to go buy a home.
Prop 13s have almost 50 years,
right,
to really ingrain all of those market skewing impacts.
Right, and it's not like in Texas terms here, Prop 13 is not like a homestead.
No,
right?
They almost have no homestead.
They have, yeah. So Prop 13 is across all market types, right? And so because of that, it encourages exactly that. Like you don't have this like mentality where, hey, I'm in my early 20s and I'm going to be a quote unquote renter, and then eventually I want to become a home owner. Like that progression that we're very like Texan used to doesn't occur in California, because the move between renter and investment owned property and a owned property is such a huge gap in cost that there's no way for you to justify spending that money unless you just want the principle of home ownership, which doesn't make a lot of sense in that market dynamic.
Right. So you're renting a home, say the person who bought it 20 years ago for a much lower price than it could sell for today.
Right. And they put it in a family
taxes,
trust so that multiple levels of the family could just keep the home.
Can pass it down.
Yeah, can pass it down.
The tax assessed value has only grown 2% a year. Right. If you were to buy that house today, maybe it's 30, 40, 50%, maybe 100% more than what it was paid for then, or the purchase price at that point. So the basis for the landlord is much lower than it would be for the new homeowner, which is why, and this, even though rent is also very expensive in California, a couple of years ago, we went to San Diego on a vacation, and my wife and I were like, oh man, we want to retire here. Let's look for some houses. Maybe we can find a way to buy a house and we can rent it. And then, that can pay for it. And then that way we'll get the benefit of Prop 13 when we retire in 15, 20 years. But every house that we looked at was so expensive and the expected rent was so low that we could never make it pencil. So we ignored that idea pretty quickly.
Which creates great opportunity for old school wealth, right? And it doesn't have to be like huge, like in Texas terms, like oil money wealth, right? But it creates opportunities for families who have lived in California for 80 years, right? Or at least 50 years of Prop 13. If they own multiple properties back then, their wealth creation is just significantly easier because of the way that system works. It puts them at an extreme advantage in the real estate market. Whereas in Texas, like everybody's on a level playing field right now from a development perspective. Anybody can go buy land and subdivide it, hire an engineer, build lots, build houses. I mean, it's really more or less just a risk tolerance issue. In California, it's not that way. So just a really different market and different perspective on that. I thought that was I think that's a very, very important point that you brought up. And so, I still think at the end of the day, we have to do a better job though in Texas of two things, exactly what we just talked about, right? We have to do a better job of explaining what is happening. And that means each individual city needs to understand who's paying the burden of the services, which it is not you don't go to an MPA program. We don't teach this at UNT. They don't teach it at UTA. They don't teach it at Texas Tech or at A&M. Nobody teaches anything about tax burden, right? So we're not looking at that. We teach about like, hey, your 5 pennies pay for this service and pennies pay for this service. And yes, we teach that. But we don't teach who's actually paying for the city services that are there. And I think if cities would go research this and look back to 2010 or 2012 or however far you want to look back, I like looking back to the 2008 real estate downturn. It's kind of a good, point in time. But if you go back and look back, I think people would be astounded with how much burden or the cost of providing services has shifted over to residential customers. So I say to city managers and city councils and finance directors, you have people coming in your meeting crying about high taxes because they're actually being hit with high taxes. That is really actually occurring. You have a house, I have a house, we all have houses, we know we're paying more. What's happening is that somebody is paying less. The city is still receiving the same amount of revenue, or 1% or 2% more than they did the year before, but ultimately those residential taxpayers are getting hit with significantly higher tax bills because of what has occurred. The second side of this is, this is a super important point that you make all the time, and I don't really talk about it or give you credit for it. There is another side of the solution, which is we need to build more housing. It has to happen. We have to do it fiscally responsible, especially if they're going to put us under a 2.5%, revenue growth cap here. So you certainly don't want to build a residential neighborhood that's going to cost you money. Think about that. Do a fiscal analysis on what you're going to build, but you still have to build more housing, and we may have to think differently about housing than we have in the past. They do a good job of wrapping that all up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So,
A+.
well, we actually talked about both topics in one there. So I'm going to move right on to college football so that we can wrap this up. First weekend of college football coming up.
Actually, well, I guess technically it's like the first full week. We did have a week 0 last weekend. Yeah. Somewhat ugly game over there in Ireland.
Didn't go well. Yeah, there were some, and apparently some after parties got a little crazy in the streets. They went out they went out to the yard. Did you hear about that one?
I heard. So I saw that Kansas State's quarterback, his dad and his brother got into a fight.
Yes, they took it. That's I'm an Irish family. We took it to the yard. We took care of it, and they did it in the homeland. So, quick story there. I'm not this razor edged, but as I used to be, the first time I ever took my wife to see my family in Pennsylvania, right outside of Philly. And, she's a Texas girl, old school German Texas girl. And we get up there and my brother and I get into it. And my dad tells us to take it to the yard, and we get right into it in the middle of the family picnic. Right. And, I'm like 22 years old. Maybe my brother's like, maybe I'm like 19 or 20 and he's like 25, but, and we get after it. And my wife looks at me and says, never again. Never again. We weren't married at the time, we were dating, but, it was an experience for her. So I get going back to Ireland. You just, you got to be Irish, right? So it's fun. But you were the number 1 team in the country this week.
We are for now,
yes.
Until at least about 2:30 Central Time, and then we'll see what happens.
On the record, what's your prediction? You're playing the number 3 team in the nation, Ohio State. What's your prediction?
Okay. With the caveat that there are a ton of variables. Both teams have new quarterbacks. Ours has at least started some games. Theirs getting his first start. Traditionally, a quarterback getting his first start against the number 1 team almost never wins. Yes. Both teams lost a bunch in the draft. Both teams are rebuilding their offensive lines. Our defense, except for the line, our linebackers and secondary did not lose a ton that they weren't able to replace. Obviously, we lost a bunch of really good cornerbacks, and Thorpe Award winner, and
your secondary's almost was obliterated.
No, it wasn't, because the guys that are still there are very good and got lots of playing time.
Okay.
Our secondary is very deep, and this one of the reasons they were so good last year is because they could keep rotating.
Yeah.
So I think defensively we're probably in a better position than offensively. There's some question marks at receiver and offensive line, and then how well Arch is going to handle the pressure of being the guy. I would put our quarterback situation ahead of theirs just because he does have a little bit more experience. I'm interested to see how the relationship between Arch and our receivers has gelled over the summer and fall. So like completely in a vacuum, I would say I think that we have the edge, even though it's in Ohio State. It isn't the big noon kickoff, so it won't be quite as rowdy as it would be if it was a night game. But we played each other Like that was our last game is in the Cotton Bowl. Like, so they probably have a better feel for how to defend certain things, how we're going to approach them. I mean, because we basically took their number one receiver out of the game. I think he got like 1 catch for 3 yards. So they probably have a little bit better idea how we will handle their attack offensively. But the wild card difference between that game and this game is that Arch is so much more mobile than Quinn.
Right.
And so, like the sack that ended the game in Dallas or in Arlington, sorry guys, never going to happen with Arch. Like he's not going to be tracked down from behind by a defensive lineman like that, or not in that scenario. So,
all right. So point prediction: Texas
point
wins
prediction,
by
31-21 Texas.
Okay, cool. I'm Texas by 2 touchdowns, so Texas by 14. That's what I'm after right now.
It must really pain you to say that.
No, it really doesn't. I'm a big fan of Arch Manning. I've told you this from day one. Like I've never, I've changed my tune a little bit. I'm not looking at the team. NIL has changed me. I'm looking at the player, right? Arch Manning has had an entire summer to know he's the starter. He didn't do anything but work with those receivers all summer long. Those receivers were literally at Arch's house. They were at the Manning passing program. They got.
He went with them to like a family party in St. Louis.
Right.
Like
I'm telling you, man, the level of training that these guys, like I would not have been shocked if Randy Moss was working with these wide receivers. Right. It's a Manning. And the Manning Pass Academy is the gold standard for any quarterback at all levels. And Arch was there all summer long with his wide receivers. I'm sorry. It is what it is. So, yeah, I think Texas by 2 touchdowns. I will also make a season prediction that Arch Manning will be in the top 5 of the Heisman and probably win it. There you go. So
I'm just hoping that we're number 1 on Saturday night. We'll move on from there.
So we're not going to make we're not really going to talk about the Aggie Texas A&M UTSA game. I think we are probably going to win that one handedly. But we are going to talk about the week 2 matchup that A&M has against Notre Dame. And your thoughts on the Texas A&M Notre Dame game.
Is that in College Station?
No, it was in College Station last year, remember? Because we can never win with game day in College Station.
You can really never win with game day
anywhere.
Period.
Yeah, it's rough.
They were the runner-up last year, right? They were in the final.
Oh yeah.
Against
very
Ohio
good,
State.
very good football team.
Do they still have Riley Leonard?
I don't know.
Or they have a new quarterback?
I don't know.
So here's I really appreciate that. Let me preface my comments with sincere appreciation for your candor and your willingness to suck it up and not just instinctively criticize Texas. With that being said, I am really skeptical about Marcel Reed.
Arm strength or what?
Arm strength, decision making.
Right.
From what I saw from him last season, I just hope that he's taken a step in the offseason. Some of the videos that I've seen on Twitter have looked good. Some of them have looked very bad, even throwing against air. And so I'm hoping that those just got posted onto my feed because they were bad and they were not representative examples for your sake.
Yep.
But I mean, ultimately, it's going to come down to him. Is he going to be a plus quarterback, or is he going to be kind of a mediocre guy who's going to win you some games and lose you some games? So that's one big variable. I mean, your defense is going to be good, right? But for me, it's all about Marcel Reed and Colin Klein. I am not a huge fan of Colin Klein's offensive philosophy.
Is that because you've had so much trouble with it in the past?
No. It's just doesn't interest me.
He's got a lot of proving to do to me after the Texas game last year.
So
running the same play 3 times in a row against a Sark defense is just dumb.
Colin Klein to me is a little bit like Mike Leach in one way, which is that Mike Leach's offense, and Art Briles is the same way. Mm-hmm. It is designed to take 3 stars and make them competitive against 5 stars. It neutralizes those advantages. He's not playing with 3 stars at A&M. You guys have 4 and 5 star talent.
Right.
And so to me, I think it possibly will be limiting for y'all.
I think for me, and this is, look, cut from the cloth I am, it's disturbing to me that we don't establish a power run game with as good of an offensive line as we have. Right. And frankly, I told you this last year. The reason I thought Texas was so good last year is because of the established run. Right. Like you could always get yourself out of any situation because I can't remember who that running back was, but man, I was just so impressed with that running back last year.
Wisner.
Yeah. It's really, really good player. And so that's kind of my complaint about Colin Klein. Is that he doesn't really take our quarterback out of the pressure cooker. He kind of leaves them in it for no reason when we have such a great line and we have great running backs. And I just feel like we could do such a better job, but he runs everything out of this, out of this spread. He never gets into a power formation. So therefore we're always outnumbered in the box. And so when he does run the ball, it's like he's running off of the RPO fake and, we're always outnumbered on the RPO. Like it's a read, but we're always outnumbered in the box. So it's 3-4 yards unless somebody's making a couple mistakes. And I think we got to be better than that. I actually think A&M wins. I'm gonna be a homer here for a minute. I think A&M wins at Notre Dame. I think it's gonna be a very close game. I don't think it's gonna be a blowout, but I do think we're able to pull off the win, mainly because Notre Dame's had a lot of changeover, and I think they got a little bit fluky last year. I felt like Notre Dame got really fluky last year. I did not think, and I said this all season, I did not think Notre Dame was a very good team last year.
I thought they were above average. I did not think that they were going to make it all the way.
Yes, they put it together.
They had so many things that kind of
went
their way.
And because of the schedule that they play, like it's so conducive for them to prepare for a game 3 weeks out. Right? Which, sorry, Doug, when you hear this, you just can't do in the SEC. Right? You can't do it. You can't go play Arkansas but be preparing for Mississippi State. Like you're going to get beat by Arkansas if you do that. And I think Notre Dame can go play like a Syracuse or whoever's on their schedule and get away with that and prepare for who they're going to see 2 rounds deep in the playoffs.
Let's see. Notre Dame football schedule.
Next year's schedule is actually harder, I think, than this year's schedule.
Let's see. They got opening at Miami. They got Purdue, Arkansas, USC. But then, they got Syracuse, Stanford, who's terrible, Pittsburgh, Boston College, Navy. Yeah, right. So they got
beat last year by Boston College. They got beat by somebody last year.
They got beat in the opening week versus who was it? No, it was the second week. Northern Illinois. Yeah,
that's right. Okay, yeah.
If Northern Illinois can beat them at home in week 2, surely you guys can.
Well, I mean, look, the answer to your question is that they've got a new quarterback. We don't. I don't disagree with you on Marcel Reed until he proves it to me. I'm different. I will tell you, my feed is all about how his arm strength has gotten stronger this year, and it is what it is, right? Like your orange blood stuff is he's the worst guy since sliced bread. I think he's a good running quarterback. I am a little skeptical he can get to a third read in the offense. I think he's a really good 2-read guy, but he has a really hard time getting to a third check. And I'm not sure his arm strength is strong enough to really get the ball downfield. And so the safeties are able to play underneath a lot. And that's a real problem. So we'll see if that arm strength is improved or not. That was the thing about Johnny Manziel, was he could throw over the top. I mean, he is, for his size, he could throw the ball a mile, right? On the run, on one
from any
foot.
angle.
out front from any angle. And so
balance.
if you were a safety, you couldn't risk somebody behind you. And where Marcel Reed is right now, like the safeties really can risk it because he's got to float the ball. He can't throw the missile, right? And if he's going to float the ball, the safeties have reaction time to get to the ball. So they can play, 35 yards deep. And if a guy's 10 yards behind them, they're probably going to have time to catch to get to it. And they can get a little risky, which you couldn't do that against some of the better Aggie quarterbacks. So, yeah, we'll see, man. I think we'll be in good shape. I don't think we're going to be 8-4 this year, Chad. I think we're going to be a little better than that. I laugh at this because Chad sent me, I don't know, probably 10 joke memes over the last 3 months about us being 8-4. And so I think
all
we'll
culminated on August 4th.
Right. I think thank you. I appreciate
National
that.
Aggie Day.
National Aggie Day. Appreciate it. I think you actually convinced my son that there was a National Aggie Day for about 5 seconds before he figured out the joke. But yeah, I think we'll be in good shape this season. Typical Aggie. I'm feeling the pride right now before we get started.
This is the beginning part of the season roller coaster.
Well, we call it BAS in our circles, right? Battered Aggie syndrome. There's a whole video that you can watch on YouTube about it. But yes, this is I'm at my peak right now. I'm at my peak, so we're good to go. But, anyways,
it's never good to start at your peak before the season,
right? Because Doug's not on the podcast, can we go ahead and make a prediction about Nebraska this season?
So when we went to San Diego the other day, we gave a talk we gave our probability forecasting talk, and I just so happened to find an example, like a real life example of a true best case, worst case scenario forecast. Like in the wild, you'd never see an actual forecast, best case, worst case, that really leans into the definitional meaning of those words. And this guy had posted his best case, worst case for the SEC schedule. And literally everyone's best case was undefeated and everyone's worst case was winless. So like, to me, this is a thing of beauty. Since Doug is not on here and since we've been going for almost an hour, I'm going to say that my prediction for Nebraska football is that worst case.
All right.
I'm going to see how long it takes for him to drive up here and punch me in the face.
I'll tell you what, he's coming all the way from Weimar, Texas, bro. He's on his way. So as he was complaining later.
I take it back. I'm going to give him one win on the last game of the season. The refs are going to give him 1 second at the end of the game, and he'll kick a game-winning field goal.
Against Cincinnati?
Just like we did in the Big 12 championship.
So the game tomorrow night with the Kelseys on the sideline, I'm sure. I bet you Taylor Swift will be there showing off that new ring. They play Cincinnati tomorrow night at 8. So that's kind of like the opening salvo of college football, right? So I think that's going to be a pretty fun game to watch. But yes, looking at their schedule, man, they're going to get at least 2 wins. They've got Akron and HCU in week 2 and 3. I think they'll get those wins in. After that, life looks a little rough. Maybe they get Maryland for a 3rd win. They get beat by Minnesota. Maybe they beat Northwestern.
You think they're going to get beat by Minnesota?
I think Minnesota beats them.
I tell you what, man, if Iowa gets a quarterback who can throw the ball, look out.
Dude, I'm telling you what, Iowa is their last game. It's their after Thanksgiving game, November 28th. So that'd be a good one too. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I learned a new Canadian saying from Doug this week. We probably should have like one that we bring up on our podcast every time, especially when he's not on our podcast. He was really upset about the Senate hearings on SB10 and what was being said in the room. And he said to me, I'm going to throw the kitchen at him. Apparently that's like a cuss word in Canadian. I'm going to throw the kitchen.
Throw the kitchen.
Yeah, throw the kitchen. So my new Canadian saying of the week. So I've used it in my personal life on numerous. I told my kid yesterday if he doesn't drink his protein after his workout, I'm going to throw the kitchen at him. He kind of looked at me like with side eyes. It was fun. But anyways, that's it, man. You ready to wrap?
We can wrap.
All right, cool. Let's wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard here, let me rephrase that, because most of the stuff that you heard here today was awful stuff. So if you appreciated the conversation, please feel free to give us a glowing 5-star review. And we'll be back here soon. We're back in the saddle now. We're going to get back into our normal routine. So keep an eye on that feed, and you'll see us again soon.
Awesome. See ya.